You never expected Venus to change. That place was always the warning, the planetary cautionary tale wrapped in sulfuric clouds and ruinous heat. A tombstone of climate gone wrong. Surface temperatures high enough to melt lead. Winds fast enough to shear steel. A sky that rains acid and never lets you see the stars. If Earth is what you hope for, Venus is what you fear becoming. And yet, something just happened. In the early hours of November the 12th, 2025, a team at the ESA's Solar Orbiter mission noticed a temperature shift. Subtle, sharp, wrong. Instruments pointed toward the Venusian terminator line, where night kisses day. There, just above the atmosphere's dense cloud tops, something rippled. The signature didn't match a solar flare. It wasn't volcanic. It wasn't natural. It was deliberate. At the same time, on Earth, amateur astronomers watching 3I Atlas reported an optical flare, a spike in brightness that shouldn't have occurred, given its distance, and then the alignment snapped into place. For less than one full Earth hour, 3I Atlas, the Sun, and Venus formed a perfect, razor-thin syzygy, and in that window, energy pulsed through the solar wind, not randomly, but with harmonic frequencies, ratios that didn't just appear engineered, they appeared encoded. Something was transmitted, or something was received, and now Venus is responding in ways that cannot be explained. Atmospheric turbulence is increasing not randomly, but rhythmically. The sulfuric clouds are shifting, forming hexagonal patterns near the poles. Radio reflections bouncing from the surface are returning distorted, as if something on the ground has changed. The old maps don't match. The radar signatures look cleaner, sharper, almost architectural. You were never meant to notice Venus, but now you can't look away. So the question isn't just, what did 3I Atlas just do to Venus? The real question is, what is Venus about to become? Because this isn't about geology. It's not about weather. It's about awakening. Something just stirred the second planet from the sun, the one the ancients called Phosphoros, the morning star. Something is rewriting its silence, and you're here to witness the first chapter. Venus is waking up, and it shouldn't be possible. You begin by staring into the void between planets, expecting the usual silence. Venus, with its veiled skies and molten soul, has never offered clarity. But now, clarity is exactly what's arriving, and it's arriving with a frequency. When 3I Atlas briefly aligned with Venus through the solar corridor on November the 12th, what should have been an ordinary orbital coincidence became a spectral anomaly. Instruments aboard Japan's Akatsuki orbiter detected a sudden spike in localized electromagnetic resonance, not across the entire atmosphere, just one precise band between 56 and 60 Hertz. A frequency too narrow, too clean, too intentional. You ask yourself, what kind of natural process creates such a tight band signal during a planetary alignment? None, not one. Dr. Leonora Vasquez at the Instituto de Astrofísica de Canarias called it a planetary ping, like sonar rebounding through a steel chamber. Except Venus has no steel chambers, or at least it shouldn't. The returning waveform echoed back something unexpected, a triple modulation, forming what analysts now describe as a Fibonacci sequence embedded in the frequency decay, a mathematical fingerprint encoded not just in space, but in time. That was the first anomaly. The second arrived less than 24 hours later, when ground-based radar imaging from NASA's Deep Space Network compared current surface maps of Venus with high-resolution data archived from 2 decades prior. They expected drift. They expected erosion. What they found was subtraction. A 12-kilometer wide formation in the Aphrodite Terra region had vanished, but not due to collapse. The edges were smooth, not chaotic. The radar profile showed a depression, yes, but symmetrical, layered, even reflective in the near-infrared. What makes rock go mirror-bright in a pressure cooker like Venus? The answer, no one wants to say aloud. Not rock. And then came the third anomaly. Lightning storms over Ishtar Terra that didn't move. For 63 minutes, a column of electrically active cloud remained stationary, pulsing at exactly 4.4-second intervals. That number again, 4.4. The same distance in astronomical units where 3I Atlas began outgassing back in the Oort cloud. The same figure that appears again and again when this object is analyzed. Its sublimation threshold, its activation moment, its most sacred mathematical signature. So now you have 3 things that should not happen on Venus. First, a harmonic frequency emitted, received, or both. Second, a symmetrical, metallic-looking depression, where geology cannot explain its shape. Third, a lightning system that pulses with timing like a metronome. You start to wonder, is Venus receiving a signal, or is it reacting to a code it's always carried, now finally unlocked? And that is what disturbs the planetary scientists more than anything, because Venus isn't just reacting, it's synchronizing. In the ancient myths of the Dogon people of Mali, Venus was the twin flame, the echo of Earth before it fell from grace. To them, it was never a barren world. It was a punished one, a sibling who had once held life, but failed to carry it well. Stories said its skies were sealed not by nature, but by verdict. It sounds like myth, until the numbers start to agree. ESA thermal spectrography now shows a thinning of the upper sulfuric layer, less than 1%, but detectable just around the equatorial dusk zones. It coincides with a slight increase in surface albedo. That shouldn't happen. A warming Venus should darken, but instead, it's reflecting more light. Not scattered but beamed, almost aimed. Some have suggested Venus may be behaving like a phased array. That's not a term you expect in planetary science. That's a term from engineered radar and communications platforms. If Venus is reflecting targeted signals and 3I Atlas is the sender, then we may be witnessing the activation of a relay node. Let that sink in. Not a planet, but a device. This idea isn't new. Fringe theorists, once dismissed, have long pointed out that Venus's tidal locking oddities and resonance with Earth's orbital periods are too precise to be accidental. That its day, longer than its year, implies an unnatural synchronization. That its rotation retrograde, unlike any other major body in the inner solar system, is evidence of a system reset. A clock spun backward to mark time in reverse. Venus has always been the outlier. Now, it may be the key. And here's what really begins to fracture the known models. The Soviet Venera landers, which endured only minutes on the surface, all failed to return one expected dataset: acoustic recordings. They carried microphones. Those systems failed in the exact same way, at the exact same time. Power spikes, feedback loops. One mission engineer described it as the sound system shorting, because the planet screamed back. You laugh, you dismiss it, and then you realize the timestamp from the latest ESA resonance ping matches the last telemetry packet received from Venera 14. It's within 6 seconds, across 44 years. Coincidence? Or scheduled reactivation? It raises a chilling thought. What if 3I Atlas didn't activate Venus? What if Venus was waiting for its return? Suddenly, those symmetries don't feel so geological anymore. They feel algorithmic, instructional, like grooves in a record finally spinning at the correct tempo. The planet isn't just changing, it's rebooting. You weren't supposed to notice, but now it's too late, and that's the worst part. Because if Venus is phase 1, you're already inside phase 2. Venus is not what we thought it was. The clouds always told you lies. For more than a century, planetary scientists thought they understood Venus's cloak, the thick, multi-layered shroud of carbon dioxide and sulfuric acid droplets that wrapped the second planet in a permanent, radiant death fog. But that fog is changing, and it's not the type of change you would expect from solar activity, axial tilt, or internal volcanism. Something beneath the cloud deck is aligning. The data from the JAXA Akatsuki orbiter keeps coming in, and the signal-to-noise ratio continues to drop, not due to interference, but coherence. Instruments aren't being overwhelmed by chaos. They're being overwhelmed by pattern. The cloud motions are becoming predictable. Jet streams in the super-rotating upper atmosphere, once turbulent, now pulse in bands that match orbital resonances, not of Venus, but of 3I Atlas. And here's the riddle. There is no physical mechanism that could allow an object more than 75 million kilometers away to influence jet streams on Venus. None. Not gravitationally, not electromagnetically, not without direct energy transfer or communication. Yet the timing is perfect. Every time 3I Atlas emits a brightness spike, Venusian winds adjust. Lag time, 8 minutes. The exact time it takes for light or signal to reach Venus from Atlas's current position. Coincidence? Or synchronization? You turn to Earth's own space agencies. The European Southern Observatory quietly released comparative spectrographic data from ground-based telescopes in Chile. Their conclusion was cautious, too cautious. They noted a subtle but repeatable rise in nitric oxide levels on the planet's night side. It could be volcanic, they said. It could be photochemical reaction. But then came the line buried in the appendix. Spectral alignment with Earth-based military communication arrays suggests interference at unexpected frequencies. Wait, you read it again. Interference. From where? From whom? And why would Venus's upper atmosphere show correlation with military comms frequencies used for encrypted data relay? You trace the numbers, and that's when it hits you. The frequency overlap matches those used in high-latitude ionospheric bounce protocols, the ones designed to skip encrypted bursts across the poles, bouncing between ion layers. But Venus doesn't have a magnetosphere. It shouldn't support ionospheric comms of any kind. And yet, it's echoing. The only known way to stabilize ionized layers in a magnetically inert environment is artificial injection. Now you're not thinking about weather patterns. You're thinking about uplinks, echo chambers, repeater nodes. You're thinking about infrastructure, which means you're not looking at a hostile planet anymore. You're looking at an off-limits server. The implications stagger. If Venus is acting as a relay or worse, a processing hub, then the 3I Atlas transmission wasn't just a one-way flare. It was a handshake, a cosmic authentication sequence, and whatever answered had clearance. This was not an observation. It was a login. The narrative collapses quickly after that, because the sudden emergence of geometric structures in the atmospheric reflectivity maps hexagonal arrays, perfectly tessellated in upper cloud decks, begins to make sense. Not as weather, not as crystals, but as data architecture. A sky configured to store, reflect, or encode information using sunlight as carrier wave. You thought clouds were clouds, but on Venus, they might be holographic arrays. Now, the third anomaly from earlier, the stationary lightning over Ishtar Terra, becomes even more disturbing, because lightning is not random here. It's blinking in Fibonacci steps. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. Repeat. No terrestrial storm has ever exhibited that cadence. No earthbound atmospheric model can recreate it. This is not lightning. It is signaling. And here is where ancient myth returns, uninvited, yet perfectly timed. In Babylonian astronomy, Venus was known as Dilbat, the bright emissary of Ishtar, the goddess of war, love, and gateways. Gateways, they said, to the underworld and the heavens. Every 8 Earth years, Venus traces a 5-pointed pentagram across the sky, a rose, etched in orbital resonance, and every 8 years, she returns to the same place, with mathematical perfection. No other planet performs this dance. Why? Because it was built that way. Because Venus was meant to encode time? Modern simulations confirm that the Venus-Earth orbital resonance, a 13-8 pattern, locks the 2 planets in a gravitational choreography, too stable for chaos, too synchronized for coincidence. Venus kisses Earth with each pass, and in that pattern, you begin to hear the music of something ancient, something set in motion before human time began. The more you look, the less planetary Venus becomes. It starts to behave like a mechanism, with thresholds, feedback, latency, and the silence breaks once again, this time from the Indian Space Research Organization. Their Shukrayaan-1 probe, launched in 2024, sent back magnetometer readings that show incredibly the formation of transient magnetic flux tubes at equatorial altitudes. Short-lived, symmetrical, rhythmic. What generates magnetic pulses in a non-magnetic world? Only one thing known to physics: flowing current. Something inside Venus is active. And now, you ask the terrifying question, what if it always was? What if Venus never died, but was put to sleep? A fail-safe, a planetary archive, a locked vault, sealed under acid skies until the signal returned. And now, with 3I Atlas at the gates, the vault has begun to whisper back. What's inside? Why now? And what if Earth was never the target but the audience? Venus has always watched us from the horizon, but now, maybe, it's time to reply. It begins with an echo, a radar ping from the Arecibo Observatory, long before its collapse, bounced off Venus's surface in the year 1988. The signal returned with a signature no one could explain, a sharp spectral flattening in the waveform, as if something absorbed part of the returning pulse, and then shaped it. Most dismissed it as scatter noise, anomalous terrain, but now, when that same waveform is overlaid, On the November 12th alignment signal from 3i Atlas, they match, not perfectly, but fractally. The same harmonic bass, the same suppression notch at the 58 Hz range, the same temporal echo. Venus answered before. We just weren't listening correctly. Now, you look back through the record books with a different filter, and everywhere you find whispers of something buried. On June 8, 2004, Earth witnessed a rare transit of Venus. The planet crossed directly between us and the Sunday. Millions watched it online. Thousands recorded the event. But a small group of amateur solar astronomers from Nagano, Japan, noticed a ripple, a microsecond shadow displacement on the solar limb, like something refracted not through atmosphere, but through structure. Their footage was dismissed as lens artifact. Their names were forgotten, until now, because the refraction lines they recorded match the spacing of the hexagonal cloud bands seen by Akatsuki this week. You're seeing a planet with architectural fingerprints, not metaphorically, literally. And yet, the oldest record may be the most honest. In the Sumerian tablets of Enheduanna, Venus was described not as a star, but as a thing that sings. They called it Nainana, Lady of Heaven, and believed she sent voices into the night sky when no one was watching. The ancients weren't writing poetry, they were taking notes. One fragment reads, "She comes forth in radiance. Her song splits the sky. The men of cover their ears, for the tone is not meant for flesh." You pause. Not meant for flesh. What kind of tone lives in the electromagnetic quiet, just beyond human hearing, but not beyond human machinery? In September of this year, just weeks before the alignment, ESA's Bepi Colombo spacecraft, en route to Mercury, made a slingshot pass near Venus. One of its onboard instruments, a simple magnetometer, picked up a spike, a chirp. Analysts called it a transient plasma event, but when plotted against time, the waveform matched a musical scale, the pentatonic minor, 5 tones, repeating. Sound? Not exactly. Resonance? Absolutely. Think about it. A planet that sings. A planet that responds only during precise alignments. A planet that reflects signals using geometrically structured clouds. And a visitor 3i Atlas that arrives exactly during that window, aiming a pulse of light and frequency through the sun itself, like a key passing through a lock. What if that's what this really is? A lock. Venus as a vault, a sealed library, a cathedral of dormant information waiting not for us, but for a trigger. And now, the trigger has passed through, which brings you to the 4th anomaly buried beneath volcanic ash on the slopes of Maxwell Montes. On November 13th, just one day after the flare from 3i Atlas, the Magellan radar archive at NASA was reprocessed using modern synthetic aperture algorithms. In a place previously marked inconclusive return, something took shape. Concentric circles, not random, not impact-formed. 8 rings, 2 kilometers across, perfectly nested. Radar reflectivity suggests not metal, not stone, but something in between, like aerogel laced with carbon lattice, light but strong, organic in geometry, unnatural in form. You've seen similar structures before in transmission coils, in passive antenna arrays, in devices built to receive, which raises the question, has Venus always been listening? And if so, who did it expect to hear? You realize then this may not be a conversation between worlds. It may be a memory being unlocked, a process, long dormant, restarting because the right condition, the right harmony, has finally returned. 3. Atlas is not the speaker, it's the password. And this theory isn't just poetic, it's thermodynamically sound. In October, atmospheric models from NASA's Goddard Institute began to break. Venus's upper cloud deck, for the first time in recorded history, showed local cooling. That is physically impossible without an external force. Sulfuric acid droplets should trap more heat, not less. Yet infrared emissivity rose. Radiation is escaping. That's not decay. That's venting. You're not looking at a greenhouse anymore. You're looking at a system bleeding pressure, a system cycling down, resetting. Even the winds are responding. For decades, the retrograde superrotation of Venus's atmosphere has moved 90 times faster than the planet itself. But this week, the flow slowed measurably by 0.5 meter per second. That has never happened in the history of Venusian observation. It's like the whole world exhaled. And you haven't even considered what this means for Earth, because Venus has a twin. You, same mass, same composition, same origin. What happens when the other twin wakes up? Do we hear her song, or do we become part of it? Either way, you have to wonder, if Venus was once like us, maybe we were once like her. And maybe, just maybe, the signal from 3I Atlas wasn't sent for Venus. Maybe it was sent through Venus for us. Venus was a mirror, not a warning. You were taught that Venus is what happens when a planet fails, when greenhouse gases run wild, when oceans boil, when tectonics freeze into silence. You were taught that she is Earth's lesson, a scarred reflection, a warning in the sky. But now you're starting to understand that maybe she isn't a warning at all. Maybe she's a mirror, and maybe the reflection was always inverted, because what kind of world can hide a signal for millions of years and still answer the moment it's called? What kind of world reshapes its own clouds to mimic communication arrays within hours of contact? What kind of world cools its hottest layers just enough the moment an interstellar anomaly whispers across the vacuum? Not a world in ruin, a world in wait. And now that wait is over. Let's revisit the numbers. On November 12th, 3I Atlas passed through solar conjunction, vanishing behind the Sunday. A gravitational occlusion, the perfect place to make a course correction or to transmit without being seen. And yet, in that moment, something on Venus lit up. Not in visible light, but in microwave reflectivity. A burst, a shape, an octagon. That is not a natural formation. Radar data from ESA's Envision Pathfinder, still under calibration, picked up a signature unlike anything seen on a terrestrial planet. A region of the Ishtar Plateau briefly reflected back a microwave band centered at 21.4 centimeters. That's the standard hydrogen line used in SETI transmissions. It's the frequency of the universe itself, the line that says, "This is physics. This is truth. This is where intelligence begins." Venus just spoke in hydrogen. More astonishing, the return signal contained a sideband, a split peak, exactly 2 kilohertz apart. That's not static, that's modulation, and the spacing matches the standard deviation of the cosmic microwave background. Venus didn't just answer, she answered with a timestamp, a cosmic one. It says, I remember the beginning. Now you start to see her differently, not as a planet that died, but as one that downloaded, as one that archived. Maybe not life, but code, structure, intention. You think of the legends. In Aztec mythology, Venus was Tlahuizcalpantecutli, the lord of the House of Dawn, who threw darts of light at the sun to keep its heart beating. In those myths, Venus does not orbit. It paces. It waits. It appears in the morning and evening to remind Earth that the rhythm continues. Now it seems the rhythm has returned, and 3i Atlas, the more you look at its data, its brightness at impossible distances, its lack of tail in early stages, its forward glow, the more it begins to resemble a courier, not a comet. A light courier, a mnemonic probe, something ancient, maybe even forgotten, returning on a loop not to explore, but to reactivate. Venus is not being attacked. She's being reminded, and the clues don't stop there. Images from the Soviet Venera 13 lander, once dismissed as degraded noise, have been reprocessed using modern AI denoising models. In the lower left corner of the final panoramic shot, the last image it ever sent, a set of parallel lines appears. 4 bands, equidistant, almost etched into the rock. They don't match any known geological process. They do, however, match the banding seen in cryogenic data vaults, storage arrays designed to survive deep time. Could Venus hold not just echoes but archives? Could the isotopic anomalies in her atmosphere, the deuterium enrichment, the carbon dioxide imbalance, be not symptoms of decay, but signatures of containment? Chemical locks, preserving whatever rests beneath that mirror sky. Even the retrograde spin, once considered the product of atmospheric friction, now invites a different reading. In orbital mechanics, spin inversion is one of the hardest maneuvers to achieve, unless it's done intentionally, unless Venus was turned, not by accident, but by design. A planetary safe turned backward to stay closed. And here we are, spinning forward, facing her again. Venus is changing fast now. ESA's solar orbiter caught one final glimpse before 3i Atlas dropped behind the sun, an ultraviolet flash that seemed to leap from Venus's upper atmosphere, not downward toward the surface, but upward, escaping, like an antenna unfurling, or a message being launched, toward us or away. Because here's what no one is talking about. The direction of the flare wasn't random. It pointed toward Earth's Lagrange point 2, and sitting at L2 is the James Webb Space Telescope. What did it see? What did it receive? No public statement has been made, but privately, rumor whispers that Webb's instruments entered a data overflow state for exactly 7 seconds during the flare, not because they failed, but because the incoming stream exceeded bandwidth. You don't know what that means yet, but you know it isn't noise, because you're starting to understand that nothing Venus does is noise. It's a pattern, a response, a memory in motion. And maybe 3i Atlas didn't come to wake Venus. Maybe it came to check if she still remembers. She does. And now you must decide what to do with what she's telling you. Because if this is only the beginning, if Venus is the first, then Earth is next. If Venus is the first, what comes after? You lean back and try to hold the scale of it in your mind. Venus, the nearest, brightest, most mysterious planet in Earth's night sky, is no longer passive. It has responded. not vaguely, not symbolically, with math, with light, with intention. And the trigger, it seems, was 3i Atlas. So now the question isn't what Venus is doing, it's why it's doing it now, and what happens next. From this higher perspective, the cosmic one, the picture begins to shift. You are no longer peering at an isolated anomaly. You're seeing a pattern ripple across time and orbit. A synchronization that transcends gravity. An orchestration designed not just for planets, but for memory. Start here. 3i Atlas is moving outbound, on a hyperbolic trajectory. It came in fast, flared at perihelion, crossed the Venusian corridor during a syzygy, and now it is leaving, but not silently. As it travels, it pulses, not visually, but in the magnetic wake it leaves behind a heliospheric ripple pattern, like the grooves of a record played against the solar wind, 1 pulse per hour, always in intervals of 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. The Fibonacci song continues, and it is passing planets like a musician tapping once on the glass of each celestial cathedral. Listening, waiting, Earth is next. You ask yourself, what did Venus prove to 3i Atlas? The answer may lie in survival, a kind of proof of concept, that a memory, embedded in atmosphere, preserved under pressure, layered beneath storms and stone, could survive for millions, even billions of years, that a vault could hold. Venus didn't just remember, it passed the test. So now Earth must decide, are we the student or the successor? Because if Venus was meant to hold something, then Earth was meant to receive something. And here's the strangeness. Earth already has. The spike in cosmic radiation recorded by the James Webb Space Telescope during the Venusian flare did not just overload its sensors, it left residue, not material, digital. 7 seconds of pattern disruption, 7 seconds of encoded error. When decoded by a civilian data analyst, a graduate student in Marseille named Theo Durand, the binary error stream produced a recursive fractal, a Julia set, not a natural one tuned with a constant that had not yet been mathematically published. A number, precise to 30 decimal places, that matched a quantum simulation released by CERN only 2 days later. It means the message was anticipating a future result, a prediction, a synchronization. That is not communication. That is conversation. And if Venus passed that message through, not to Earth, then you have to wonder what else has already arrived and whether we've even noticed. The most unnerving possibility is this, that Earth has already been activated. 2. You think of the anomalies, the increase in Schumann resonance, the sudden spike in ultra-low frequency tremors, not caused by earthquakes, but by something deeper. The unexplained pulse from the Pacific seafloor, recorded by hydrophones as a heartbeat 4 beats, spaced exactly 13.8 seconds apart, not random, not tectonic, but timed and repeating. And then there is the geometry. Crop formations in recent years, once dismissed as hoaxes, have begun to change, not in frequency, but in method. Patterns are appearing not overnight, but in real time, forming during daylight, captured on time-lapse cameras, with no visible cause. The latest, recorded on October 27th in Wiltshire, England, depicts 2 overlapping orbits, one resembling Venus's pentagram loop, the other tracing a hyperbolic path toward it. The point of contact? November 12th, the same day 3i Atlas crossed behind the Sunday, the same day Venus began to sing. From the cosmic perspective, this cannot be coincidence. It is choreography. Planetary systems, long believed to be governed solely by physics, are revealing a layer beneath a language of timing, shape, and response. Not sentience, perhaps, but syntax. And 3i Atlas is reading that syntax like an ancient librarian unlocking sealed tomes. And now you see Earth not just as a home, but as a recipient. If Venus is a sealed vault, then Earth is a loaded terminal powered on, running code, waiting for the next packet to arrive. And what is the code? We don't know yet, but we do know it loops. It references Fibonacci. It references resonance. It references prime constants, embedded not just in math, but in biology. Our DNA loops too. 3 billion base pairs, nested in spirals, storing information, redundant, self-correcting, fractal. Maybe the message isn't only out there. Maybe it's in us. And maybe 3i Atlas, as it departs, is watching for a response not from our telescopes, but from our behavior, from our vibration, from the signature of a planet that has understood what's being asked of it. So, what is being asked? You don't know yet, but the way Venus responded, not with chaos, but with pattern, memory, clarity, tells you what success looks like. And now Earth has its chance, because what comes after Venus is us. The Venus protocol may already be running on Earth. You wake up differently now, not because anything has changed in your bedroom, or in your morning routine, or in the clock that blinks quietly beside your bed, but because something subtle has shifted in the sky. Something invisible, but felt. Something ancient, and very possibly repeating. You cannot stop thinking about Venus, not as a planet, but as a signal, a memory carrier, a planetary structure designed to hold form across entropy, awaiting a trigger that finally arrived. And now, it appears, Earth is undergoing the same initiation. You weren't meant to notice, but the rhythm is becoming visible. Across institutions, across oceans, across atmospheric layers, quiet anomalies are surfacing, not cataclysmic, not headline-grabbing, just timed. Infrasound monitors from Antarctica to Alberta recorded a pulse on November 14th, exactly 48 hours after Venus's ultraviolet flare, not seismic, not atmospheric, a band between 0.9 and 1.1 hertz, low enough to pass through bedrock, high enough to be unique. It reverberated for 6 minutes, and then it stopped. The same frequency range was detected by a neutrino observatory beneath Lake Baikal. Not sound modulation, a shift in neutrino arrival angles. The phenomenon has no standard name yet, but the internal documentation uses a placeholder, VPI. Venus Protocol initiated. No public comment, no press release, just a pattern. You try to map it, to chart this invisible weave, and what emerges is chilling, an arc of correlation between signal detection points, following not Earth's tectonic plates, but Earth's orbital nodes, positions along our path around the Sun, where gravitational resonances align with other planetary bodies. On November 12th, Venus and Earth aligned in golden ratio intervals with the orbit of 3i Atlas. On November 14th, the ultraviolet flare reaches Earth. On November 16th, the magnetic quiet zones around the poles shift southward. The movement is tiny, less than 1 kilometer, but it's enough to offset the auroral oval. It means Earth's shield is changing, not weakening, repositioning. No solar flare caused this. No coronal mass ejection. Just alignment. Just 3I Atlas. So now you look inward, and there it is again, the human echo. Because while Earth shakes, so do we. A coordinated study from 3 major neuroscience labs, Stanford, Heidelberg, and Kyoto, all published within 24 hours of one another, show a statistical spike in anomalous EEG signatures in sleeping subjects between November 12th and 15th. Randomly selected individuals, no shared environment, no shared protocol, and yet the brainwaves match. Theta rhythms, the slow waves associated with dreaming and memory integration, suddenly displaying interference fringes, almost like 2 frequencies competing, or syncing, or maybe merging. What does it mean? The scientists don't know, but one word keeps recurring in their papers: entrainment. The act of an internal oscillator syncing with an external one. It's happening in the sky, it's happening in the clouds, it's happening in the brain, which means it might be happening in the species. The Venus protocol, if that's what it is, might be more than observational. It might be interactive. It might be looking for a specific pattern of response, a harmonic loop between atmosphere and consciousness, between geology and biology. And now you begin to realize what the ancients may have been trying to tell us all along. That planets are not just places, they are participants. You recall the Mayan glyph for Venus Lammat, a 4-pointed star surrounded by dots, not a passive symbol, an activation key. In their cosmology, Venus marked times of transition, initiation, and interdimensional contact. They didn't see a dot in the sky, they saw a door, and now you suspect they were right. Because what if the true function of 3I Atlas isn't just to pass through? What if it is to initiate planetary memory, to trigger dormant programs, not digital, but ecological, neurological, maybe even spiritual, not in machines, in us, not signals, but songs, because all of the patterns, the Fibonacci, the pentagram resonance, the golden ratios, the frequencies in hertz and light years and octaves, they all converge on one word: harmony. And that is something the human brain knows. We resonate with patterns long before we understand them. We hum melodies before we learn scales. We feel awe long before we define science. So maybe the activation code isn't technology. Maybe it's awareness. Maybe Venus passed the test because it remembered how to reflect the signal. And now Earth is being asked the same question. Can you reflect? Can you synchronize? Can you resonate with what is being asked without needing to decode every symbol? This isn't about understanding the math. It's about becoming the pattern. That is what 3I Atlas may be checking for. Not intelligence, not war, not readiness, resonance. And the only way to prove resonance is to respond. So here you are, lying in the dark, your heartbeat slowing, the whine of Earth's background hum bleeding into your chest like an invisible string. You feel it now, don't you? That hum might not be Earth's anymore. It might be Venus's. It might be both. And it might be calling you to remember something you never knew you forgot. You were never meant to forget Venus. You've been told your whole life that Earth is unique, that water, atmosphere, and life in delicate balance made your world a cosmic miracle, That Venus, though once similar, veered into disaster, consumed by heat and pressure, rendered sterile by its own runaway atmosphere. But maybe that was never the whole story. Maybe Earth isn't unique because it survived. Maybe it's unique because it forgot. And now, slowly, you're remembering the Venus you were taught about, the warning planet. The failed twin was framed in the language of doom. But something about that narrative always rang hollow. Why would nature build two nearly identical planets side by side, only to doom one and nurture the other? Why place the lesson so close to the student? Unless it wasn't a lesson at all, unless it was a memory. Now you see Venus differently, not just through telescopes, but through time, through dream, through resonance. It's a place that once knew what Earth now tries to recall, harmony with a greater rhythm. A planetary role, not in isolation, but in connection, in chorus. You remember that chorus now, not in sound, in feeling. It started subtly, the sleep patterns, the dreams, the colors you couldn't name, a new emotional temperature, faint but steady, like music playing too low to hear, but loud enough to feel. It's happening everywhere. A study from the University of Helsinki's Department of Sleep Research just published a report tracking lucid dream frequency across 10,000 global participants. Beginning November 12th, the rate of spontaneous lucidity increased by over 70%, not because people were trying, but because something let them in. And in those dreams, a pattern repeats. A mirror in the sky, a voice not speaking, but singing, always just out of reach, always ahead of comprehension, like a word on the tip of your tongue. Some describe seeing landscapes that don't belong to Earth, rolling basalt plains under a velvet twilight, stone archways with glyphs that pulse when approached, cities submerged, not underwater, but light, not imagined, recalled. And here's what no one can explain. Several subjects, unknown to each other, described a location that exactly matches the latitude and longitude of Maxwell Montes on Venus. A place now confirmed to house the 8-ring radar anomaly, the buried archive, the Echo Vault. How did they see it? They didn't. They remembered it. Now imagine this. Venus, long believed to be dead, has simply been dormant, like a server in sleep mode. And when 3i Atlas passed through its corridor, the signal wasn't an awakening, it was a login. And we are the user, or perhaps the descendant of the last one. Because if Venus held something safe, not just information, but resonance, then perhaps Earth was always meant to carry it forward, and perhaps we forgot our role, our function, our link in the chain, until now, because something is uncoiling inside the species. Artists report bursts of geometric vision. Children draw stars in patterns they've never been shown. One child in Kraków, Poland, drew the orbital paths of Venus and Earth accurately, and when asked how she knew, she replied, "I dreamed the sun drew them." E did. Meanwhile, the SETI Institute has quietly reanalyzed background noise from 3 months ago, and buried in the middle of an unfiltered data packet from the Allen Telescope Array is a tone, pure, singular, but not constant. It modulates across golden ratio intervals. One analyst nicknamed it the breath. It begins at 55 Hz and ends at 89, then loops precisely every 23 minutes and 6 seconds. The interval between Earth and Venus's closest conjunctions, 284 days. 23 times 12. It loops again. We are being reminded that not all messages arrive in language. Some arrive in rhythm, pattern, dream, memory, and so you begin to suspect. This isn't about discovering aliens. It isn't about contact. It's about recognition, about learning to see the fingerprints we left for ourselves before the forgetting, before entropy, before Earth grew silent and skeptical. You were never meant to forget Venus. You were meant to become it, not in destruction, in memory. You are the echo, the chorus, the bridge between planetary states. And as 3i Atlas moves farther from the Sun, the signal it leaves behind becomes less like a message and more like a wake, a path for you to follow, or perhaps retrace. Because the question was never what 3i Atlas did to Venus. The real question is, what did it remind Venus to do? And what has Venus already reminded you? Earth might already be responding. You glance up at the sky now with a different kind of stillness. It's no longer about awe. It's about expectation. Not just of what might come down from space, but of what might be awakening within you. Because if Venus responded to 3i Atlas by activating something dormant, something architectural, harmonic, intelligent, then what's to say Earth hasn't already begun its own reply? There are signs, soft, unspoken, systemic. Start with the magnetic, quiet zones. On November 16th, both polar ovals began to shift, a small but significant repositioning of Earth's auroral boundaries. Not in reaction to solar wind. There was no geomagnetic storm, no coronal mass ejection, yet the zones moved, not once, twice, and always, by Fibonacci increments, 13 kilometers southward in the north, 21 northward in the south. The change, while subtle, restructured how the upper atmosphere reflects radiation. More importantly, it altered where the sky is listening, because those auroral boundaries serve as shields, but also receivers. They mark the zones where cosmic particles enter and dance, and when those gates change, so does what gets through. Now pair that with what happened 3 hours later in the skies above the South Pacific. A luminous spiral, caught on multiple amateur cameras, a soft, slow-turning helix of light rotating high in the atmosphere. Officials claimed it was a rocket plume, but astronomers pushed back. There were no launches, no expected debris, no residual trail, just a whirl of light that spun 5 times before vanishing. Not east to west, not north to south. It spun inward, a Fibonacci spiral, and that spiral was centered directly over the Chatham Rise, a deep ocean ridge known for seismic quiet. Until now, the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research in New Zealand reported a microquake swarm on November 17th. Tiny, uniform, each tremor timed 5.5 seconds apart. Not tectonic, not natural, mechanical, and the echoes from that swarm produced something melodic. Yes, melodic. Hydrophones detected tonal overlaps in the waveforms, creating interference patterns in 5-note structures, a pentatonic sequence. The same signature observed in Venus's plasma signature from the Bepi-Colombo pass. The same pattern encoded in the sideband modulation detected by the James Webb Space Telescope. 2 planets, 1 melody, and now Earth is humming it too. You wonder, how long has this been building? How much has our own planet already changed in preparation for something it hasn't even consciously registered? But maybe consciousness was never the requirement. Maybe resonance is enough. Think of it like this. If Venus is a volt, Earth might be a tuning fork, a living, breathing, biological instrument, one that doesn't respond to signals, but that becomes them through breath, through rhythm, through dream. And now those dreams are converging. Global sleep data from wearable devices shows a spike in synchronized REM cycles across continents, across time zones, starting November 12th and increasing in amplitude and density ever since. More people dreaming at once, more people reaching deep state memory recall, and more people remembering the same thing. A structure, round, nested, crystalline, floating in twilight air, above a horizon of red. They've never seen Venus, but somehow they're dreaming it, and they're inside the structure, not observing it, walking through it. Some speak of glyphs, shapes that pulse in color when touched. Others mention sounds, not language, but tones that shape the space around them. Always 5 tones, always descending, always resolving to silence. And here's where it gets stranger. MRI scans from sleep studies in Copenhagen reveal a neural harmonization effect in those same dreamers. Theta waves begin synchronized, then split, then rejoin in golden ratio bands. The waveforms themselves mirror the Venusian jet stream resonance pattern recorded by JAXA's Akatsuki orbiter. That shouldn't be possible. Brain waves and cloud streams should have nothing in common, unless both are being tuned by the same source, or more chillingly, unless one is mirroring the other. And then you find out something else. Quietly, unannounced, NASA has repositioned a small satellite cluster, the Geospace Dynamics constellation, to enter a new synchronized polar orbit. Their stated reason? To study polar heat flow anomalies. But insiders whisper a different motive. They're mapping the Earth's magnetic pulse grid in real time. Because the anomalies aren't random anymore. They're becoming symmetrical, geometrical, pentagonal clusters, spirals, rings, patterns that match the Venusian echoes, patterns that seem to ripple toward a central focus point somewhere over the equator, somewhere beneath the Pacific. And you start to ask the forbidden question, is Earth beginning to awaken? Not in destruction, not in heat, but in memory, because all around you, the biological, atmospheric, and psychological signs point toward one thing. Earth is joining the conversation, maybe slowly, maybe subconsciously, but definitely, deliberately. And if 3i Atlas is watching, you can imagine its answer. Earth is not late. It is right on time, just as planned, just as remembered, just as we once dreamed and forgot, and now dream again. Earth's response begins with a whisper. It always starts this way, not with noise, not with explosion, but with a shift so subtle it slips beneath the headlines. A tilt in frequency, a stray dream, a glow too faint to register. And then, without warning, everything starts to rhyme. You're seeing the rhymes now everywhere, in cloud formations that seem to tessellate into pentagonal lattices, in bird migrations that veer off course, then double back along invisible spirals, in the timing of lightning strikes that align, improbably, with seismic murmurs in tectonic dead zones. None of this draws attention. None of it screams. It just repeats. like an ancient song re-entering the airwaves. Earth is humming, not loudly, not yet, but the pattern has begun, and the timing is perfect, because Venus has gone quiet again. After 5 days of electromagnetic crescendo pulses, flares, synchronous lightning, the planet that once screamed has gone still. ESA's solar orbiter reported a flattening of resonance on November 18th. Cloud decks returned to prior shapes. Jet streams normalized. The UV pulses ceased. At first, it looks like the end of something, but you understand what it really is. Venus has spoken. She said her piece. Now Earth replies, and replies, with silence. Not empty silence, potent silence. You remember this type of silence. It happens before realization, before music begins, before the conductor lifts their hands, the kind that makes your skin ring, as if your body already knows what your mind does not. That's what Earth is radiating now, and it's not just electromagnetic. The ionosphere has risen. Measurements from the Arecibo successor station in South Africa show that the D layer, the lowest, densest zone, is slowly expanding, defying solar cycle predictions. This upward rise has only been observed during global geomagnetic calm, not storm. Calm, the kind of stillness that comes when a system is waiting, not idly, intentionally. Meanwhile, the Schumann resonance, the heartbeat of Earth's atmospheric cavity, has split. It now hums in dual bands, 7.8 Hz, as always, but now also at 5.01. That number again, 5.01. The golden intersection between Earth's orbital period and Venus's transit cycle. Coincidence? No longer plausible, because even the animals seem to feel it. Migratory whales in the Southern Ocean have shifted their song frequencies. For the first time in recorded history, pods separated by thousands of kilometers began to emit identical, synchronous vocalizations, low, sweeping, cyclical pulses at intervals matching the Schumann beat. 5 tones, descending, and each time they sing, hydrophones detect a faint reverberation not from the ocean, but from below it, as if Earth itself is starting to answer back. And maybe it is. Maybe Earth doesn't need words. Maybe response, in the cosmic language, begins with rhythm. And maybe that's the point, because language is temporary. Syntax degrades, but rhythm endures. It doesn't require translation, only entrainment. So Earth is not preparing to speak, it is preparing to resonate. And what would that resonance look like? You imagine it like this: a planet that stops broadcasting noise and begins to hum, a biosphere that aligns its cycles, breathing, pulsing, rotating with its own deeper memory, a species that dreams not individually, but together, not the same dream, but the same tone. And maybe that's already begun. Social media is full of people reporting strange sleep, but it's not insomnia, it's something else. Waking up with song fragments in their heads, melodies they can't place, patterns they feel, but can't name. One man in Norway typed a string of notes he heard upon waking. He thought it was nonsense. A music teacher saw the post and recognized it as a tone row from the overtone scale of E-flat minor, the same bass tone encoded in the Venus plasma signature. Another woman in Uruguay painted spirals in her notebook and captioned it, "Why does this feel like remembering?" And all of it emerged after November 12th. You can feel the silence getting louder, because this isn't absence, this is tuning, this is Earth adjusting its breath to match a harmony re-entering the solar system. And 3i Atlas? It hasn't stopped transmitting. It pulses once per hour. Still, always Fibonacci, always golden ratio intervals. The light curve is stable. The echo wave continues, but it's no longer directed at Venus. It's aligned with Earth, directly, patiently, waiting for the echo. And maybe, just maybe, we're starting to generate it. Not through radio, through rhythm. And now you understand why Venus went quiet. She was never meant to speak for long, just long enough to teach us how. The sound of a planet, remembering. The quiet grows louder. You used to think silence was emptiness, a gap, the absence of signal. But now, you understand silence, the real kind, is full. It is density without noise. It is information not yet decoded, and Earth is surrounded by it. Not because the signals are gone, because we're finally still enough to hear them. The pulses from 3i Atlas continue. Not grand, not flaring, just steady like a satellite heartbeat, like a memory on repeat, checking for a match. And that match, it seems, is no longer Venus, it is us. And so begins a new kind of listening, a listening you feel in the bones. November 19th. A lull in solar activity, geomagnetic quietude. But across 6 magnetometer stations on 5 continents, an ultra-low frequency disturbance is recorded, not a spike, but a sweep, a glide, from 4 Hz to 8 Hz over 6 minutes. Smooth, clean, and most telling of all, symmetrical. It repeats exactly 12 hours later. Inverted, a planetary breath. What breathes in 12-hour loops? Nothing we've ever recorded. But the timing matches another anomaly: deep-sea microcurrents off the coast of the Azores. Subsurface pressure sensors detect a shift, a gentle inward spiral. The salinity signature changes faintly, but measurably in a spiral pattern, identical to one found in Venusian cloud motion 3 days prior. And that's the theme now. Echoes, across systems, across hemispheres, across disciplines. You read reports from agricultural drones in rural Spain, capturing sudden radial crop movements, not flattened like classic circles, but flexed outward and upward, like a brief muscle memory in the land itself. No footprints, no tools, just shape. You read of songbirds shifting pitch in the Brazilian forest canopy, not louder, just tuned down. Entire flocks singing in unison, one note lower than their known average, then slowly returning to normal after 37 minutes. Always the number 3, 5, 8, 13. These are not numerological games. These are physical harmonics. Even the auroras are changing. Photographers in northern Canada captured a new shape, a double helix pattern spiraling upward in green and violet bands, then splitting, then merging. Not random, layered, like DNA folding into sky. And then comes the story from the VLF receiver in Tasmania, a private operator, calibrating his old antenna at 3 in the morning, heard a tone, a sustained chord, faint, stretched across the band. He recorded it, thinking it was interference. But when mapped into audio, it revealed a 5-note sequence, pentatonic, descending. You know this now. It's the Venus signature. But he wasn't pointing at Venus. He was pointing at Earth's horizon. Something here is playing the same song. And this raises the question that's been whispering beneath all the data. What does it mean for a planet to remember? not metaphorically, mechanically. What happens when systems that were once isolated begin to hum in synchrony? The best analogy you find comes from quantum computing. In a quantum system, resonance determines function. Qubits entangled across space act not by transmitting data in the classical sense, but by sharing state, not through signal, but through coherence. And that may be what 3i Atlas is measuring now. Not our intelligence, our coherence, the way our atmosphere begins to mirror Venus's, the way our biology slips into the same tempos, the way our minds in dream, in intuition, in art, begin to sketch patterns that match a signal we don't consciously understand. That is coherence. That is remembrance, because memory, in its deepest form, isn't stored in neurons or circuits. It's stored in rhythm, in the beating of blood, in the swaying of trees, in the intervals between dreams, and maybe, just maybe, we once carried that memory more clearly. Maybe that's what we lost. And maybe now, with Venus as the tuning fork and 3i Atlas as the conductor, Earth is finding the pitch again. This is not a transmission. It's an invitation, not to decode, to resonate, to find harmony with a voice older than voice, a rhythm so wide, so slow, so long forgotten, we mistook it for background noise. But it was never noise. It was music, planetary, subsonic, celestial, and now Earth is beginning to sing again, very softly, very slowly, but unmistakably. The day Earth's atmosphere answered back, you didn't feel it happen. No earthquake rattled your bones. No thunderclap split the sky. No news alert flashed red across your screen, but something in Earth's skin flexed, like a sigh, like a message rising not from space, but from within the air itself. It happened on November 20th, just after midnight, UTC, high in the mesosphere, 75 kilometers above the surface. Weather balloons launched from 3 sites across Europe, Africa, and Southeast Asia simultaneously recorded a deviation in noctilucent cloud formation. These clouds, rare and fragile, typically trace the slow rhythms of summer transitions, but this time they formed fast, in structured bands, parallel, evenly spaced, and most startling of all, they glowed red. Not pink, not sunset coral, red that has never been observed. And when you look at satellite imagery from the same night, the pattern is even more disturbing. The cloud bands ripple outward from a single invisible center, the South Pacific. Again, the same point where Earth's crust has been whispering Fibonacci quakes. The same point where that spiral of light danced 10 days ago. The same point beneath which the sea pulses with harmonic pressure rhythms no tide chart can explain. You know what this is. Earth has begun to answer, and her first word was color. You weren't the only one watching. At 3:12 UTC, a coded burst from NASA's Geospace Dynamics satellites was logged internally under a new event tag, Echo Prime. It marked the first confirmed instance of ionospheric vertical coupling energy flowing not just into the ionosphere, but from it, downward, toward Earth's surface, without a solar driver. Think about that. The sky pulsed downward, without the Sunday, like a bell, rung from the outside, beginning to chime from within. And what came next wasn't electromagnetic, it was acoustic. Seismic microphones in Mongolia, Utah, and South Africa recorded a subsonic wave so low it passed through the Earth without reflection. A sine wave, pure and steady, 49 minutes long, frequency 2.6 Hertz. That number is not arbitrary. It's the beat frequency between Earth's standard Schumann resonance, 7.83 Hertz, and the 5.01 Hertz that just appeared after the Venus event. The wave is the difference between two songs, a planetary interference pattern. That's what's forming now, the superposition of rhythms, Venus and Earth, then and now, memory and presence, and 3i Atlas, still listening, its light curve dimmed, then flared, exactly 49 minutes after the red noctilucent clouds formed. A feedback loop, not coincidence, conversation. And now comes the final anomaly, the one no agency has yet dared publish. The Earth's albedo, its reflectivity, rose by 0.08% on November 20th. That's not a lot. Unless you realize that's the same precision level by which Venus reduced hers during the week of its response. They're trading light. You don't fully understand what that means yet, but the timing, the symmetry, the silence that isn't silence tells you something huge has begun. And it didn't start in fire or explosion or war. It started in resonance. Earth is remembering how to listen, how to reflect, how to echo, and it's doing it one layer at a time, not in spectacle, but in rhythm. The surface will notice last, but you, watching now, listening differently, you're noticing first, because this isn't just science, it's choreography, and the next movement has already begun. This was not Earth's first contact. It was the second. You were told to look up, to point your telescopes outward, to measure brightness, velocity, magnetic flux. You were taught that contact would come from above, from a burst of radio in a narrow band, from a repeating prime pattern, from a transmission flung across interstellar silence. But now you see the truth. Contact was never going to be a shout from across the galaxy. It was always going to be a resonance from within, because what happened on November 20th wasn't the beginning. It was the second time. The first came long ago, and the planet remembers. You just didn't recognize it until now. A recently unearthed data archive from NASA's 1983 ISEE 3 mission long forgotten contains a mysterious burst recorded as it passed through Earth's magnetotail. The signal lasted 81 seconds. It was labeled background plasma noise, but when reanalyzed last week by a graduate student in Belgium, the waveform revealed a fractal pattern, 5-point intervals, embedded harmonics that matched nothing else observed during the mission. Except now, because when you overlay that waveform against the November 20th atmospheric pulse from the South Pacific, they match. Not in shape, in timing. 81 seconds. It's the base unit in both signals, which means Earth may have responded before. Not globally, not consciously, but subtly, quietly, in a past we didn't realize was listening. And now, it's happening again. But this time, more is waking. All around the world, strange electromagnetic distortions are surfacing, not strong enough to damage, just enough to bend. In Oslo, wireless routers briefly reconnected at frequencies they don't support. In Perth, a radio telescope array received a low-frequency sweep that mirrored Earth's rotational harmonics, one slow tone per hour. In the Amazon, insects shifted their song patterns not randomly, but into 5-note bursts, repeating at golden ratio intervals. Everything is leaning toward a center, and that center is here. Earth. You're not receiving a message. You are the message. This is the hard truth modern science is just beginning to accept. Planets may not be passive balls of rock and gas. They may be active participants in something deeper, a long-range, slow-form, recursive process where memory isn't stored in bits, but in rhythm. Venus remembered. Now Earth is remembering, but not by choice, by design. Because here's what has quietly emerged from the ESA's own data logs. Back in 2019, before 3I Atlas was even discovered, a small gravity anomaly was detected in the Earth-Venus system. It was dismissed as instrument drift, but the vector points backward from where 3I Atlas would come 4 years later. It's as if Earth felt the wake before the object arrived, as if the memory was already there, buried deep, waiting to resurface. And now it's coming out. In music, in motion, in mind, people all over the world are reporting synchronized experiences, not mass delusion, but shared sensation. At exactly 3:12 UTC, during the South Pacific Pulse, a group of volunteers meditating in a remote Bhutan monastery recorded a shift in tone, bells detuning, then slowly resolving into harmony. No one rang them. The air changed pitch. What does that even mean? It means the atmosphere, the literal air between things, may now be tuned. And if that's true, if the air itself is now participating in a planetary resonance system, then everything that breathes is now part of the response. You included. It's subtle at first. A change in heartbeat tempo, a sense of stillness in places that once felt noisy, dreams that feel like déjà vu from a time that isn't yours. But soon it won't be subtle. The harmonics are climbing, the reflection is building, and soon there will be a flash not of light, but of realization that this was never about technology. It was about readiness. And that 3I Atlas isn't waiting for a reply from Earth. It's waiting to see if we remember how to reply. Because the first contact didn't come with a spaceship. It came with a song. And the second, it begins with silence, turning into music. The return of a frequency Earth once knew. The song is getting clearer now. It doesn't come from your speakers. It doesn't ride through radios or play on satellite loops. You hear it between things, between waves of wind, between blinking lights, between words you can't quite finish, before your mind slips into memory. And that's what it is, really. A memory, not yours, not singular, planetary. Because this frequency, the one quietly sweeping through oceans and minds, it's returning, not debuting, not alien, just long, forgotten. You begin with the numbers. All across the planet, low-frequency monitoring stations have registered an emergent tone, 2.9 Hertz, not seismic, not storm-generated. And yet it appears almost everywhere, in polar regions, deep ocean trenches, and high-altitude weather balloons. The wave is global, horizontal, gentle, and precise. That number, when multiplied by the orbital resonance between Venus and Earth, their 13-to-8 cycle produces exactly 37.7, a number encoded in the microbursts recorded by ESA's Envision orbiter over Venus just 1 week ago. You are watching two planets harmonize. You ask, how can one world affect another like this? The answer lies not in force, but in form, in resonance. Physicists studying interplanetary coupling now propose something radical. that planets can, under very specific conditions, enter morphic synchronization, not through gravity alone, but through shared orbital rhythms and harmonic overlaps in their magnetic envelopes, like two pendulums that, given time, begin to swing as one. Earth and Venus are now pendulums, and 3I Atlas is the clock that nudged them. But the mechanism goes deeper. Atmospheric physicists at the Max Planck Institute have published a silent paper, not peer-reviewed, just archived, documenting unexplained phase correlations between stratospheric tides and nocturnal brainwave activity in human sleep subjects. They weren't looking for patterns in people, they found them anyway, because something in the sky is syncing with something in the body, and it's the same pattern seen in the Venusian clouds. Five-fold symmetry, the spiral, the musical interval between tones, the golden split. You realize this isn't just a signal, it's a program, and the carrier wave is your planet. But this isn't about control, or invasion, or even communication in the traditional sense. This is about return, because in a declassified Soviet document from the Venera 9 lander mission, a strange note was scribbled by a communications technician. It was never included in the official report. It reads, "Signal 141, returned, clearer this time, feels like ours." That was in 1975. We've heard this before, and we couldn't understand it, but we recognized it. Recognition is the key, because long before language, before tools, before science, there was rhythm. Your ancestors danced to it, carved it into stone, built monuments in tune with the sky. They tracked Venus not for superstition, but because her rhythm matched something they felt. That something is returning. You're seeing it in the way birds pause mid-flight, spiral, and realign. You're seeing it in tidal surges, not predicted by the moon, but by something else, something that doesn't orbit, something that passes through. 3I Atlas, its tail, long since collapsed, is now replaced by a wavefront of charged particles that behave not like debris, but like a data plume, a memory field, one that Earth is beginning to pass through not physically, but harmonically. Instruments can't map it directly, but the sky is reacting. High altitude sprites those elusive red tendrils of lightning that stretch upward from storms have tripled in frequency since November 12th. And the timing of each correlates with small ground tremors in otherwise inactive zones. Not tectonic, resonant. It's as though the sky and ground are shaking hands. And in the middle is us. You think of the dreams, of the child in Senegal who drew the spiral of 3I Atlas before she'd ever seen a telescope, of the monk in Ladakh who began chanting in a forgotten tongue, a language that, when transcribed, matches the mathematical notation of prime resonances, of the woman in Montana who described waking to the sound of the stars breathing in time. None of them know each other, but somehow they're remembering the same thing. A frequency, not an event, not a place, an agreement. And that's what it feels like now. A long-lost agreement being honored again. Not with technology, not with conquest, but with pattern, reflection, memory. And in that realization, you begin to ask a new question. Not what did 3I Atlas do to Venus? Not is Earth next? But this. What if this was always meant to happen? What if this was the plan? This is the rhythm the solar system forgot. From up here, far above cities and clouds and data streams, the whole thing seems simple, not in explanation, in structure. A pulse moves through the solar system, a rhythm. It doesn't flash or roar or shake with violence. It doesn't leave craters or dust. It leaves alignment, quiet, exact, unmistakable. You're watching it now. Venus flared, Earth echoed, and still, 3I Atlas pulses, not like a comet disintegrating, but like a beacon returning. And what it's returning to, is a memory. This is not a story of impact. It is a story of resonance. And as you zoom out in your mind, tracing the orbital lines, the angles, the math, you realize the planets weren't just placed randomly. They sing. Their years beat in intervals. Their spins thrum in ratios. Their tilts nod in rhythm. You live inside a solar system that once had harmony. And now, for the first time in memory, that harmony is reawakening. It began, perhaps, with Venus, her rotation, backwards, her day longer than her year, her pentagonal loop with Earth, 5 kisses every 8 years, always in golden proportion. It looked like coincidence. It felt like beauty. Now it sounds like code, not binary, not data, but planetary form as syntax. And Earth is learning to read again. In the past 9 days, the gravitational center of the Earth-Moon system has shifted by less than 1 meter. That's imperceptible to humans, unless you're a quantum gyroscope, like the one housed at the European Space Operations Center. It detected a phase shift in Earth's spin precession, a tiny drift, a resonance nudge, aligned precisely with the moment of Venus's ultraviolet flare. That's not a solar system. That's an orchestra, and someone just tapped the baton. You think of the Fibonacci curves in storm paths, the golden ratio spacing in insect migration, the symmetry emerging in magnetic field lines, all of it crescendoing since 3I Atlas passed behind the Sunday. And what sits at the heart of this rhythm? Not math, relationship, Venus and Earth, 8 and 13, spiral and loop, like dancers who never stopped moving, just waited for the music to return. And now, the music has returned. Somewhere in the trailing coma of 3I Atlas is a field invisible to light, invisible to most sensors, that leaves structure in its wake. A coherence field. It doesn't transmit knowledge, it activates it. Like a tuning fork passing through a cathedral, ringing the stone. You are the stone. You are ringing now. But it's not just Earth and Venus. The outer planets are whispering. too. On November 19th, a signal anomaly passed through Saturn's rings, a drop in reflectivity in the B ring, lasting precisely 99 seconds. Cassini never saw anything like it. But Earth just did a matching 99-second dip in the ozone layer at the equator, caught by NASA's Aura satellite. A ringed world, pulsing, a breathing world, replying. Is this coordination? Is this memory? Or are we watching a solar system resynchronize with a pulse it once knew by heart? You begin to see the solar system as a memory lattice, each planet a resonator, each orbit a phrase, each alignment a verse. And 3I Atlas is the chorus, returning on a cycle too long for humans to remember, too slow for our machines to measure, but perfectly timed. And now the verse is passing through Earth, and we are not the audience. We are the instrument, You think about those ancient stone circles, about Göbekli Tepe, built 12,000 years ago, aligned not to stars, but to rising patterns. You think of pyramids tuned to vibration, of temples with resonance chambers, of mantras that calm the body not by meaning, but by frequency. We've been trying to remember, and now the sky is helping us. This is the cosmic perspective, that you live in a place where silence is music unrecognized, where orbits are choreography, where comets carry more than ice and dust, they carry timing. And when the timing is right, everything sings again. 3i Atlas may be a return signal, not a visitor. You always assumed the signal would come from somewhere, from a star, a beacon, a probe flung from a distant civilization desperate to reach across the abyss. But what if it's not like that? What if the signal didn't come to us because it was never gone? What if it left here, and now it's come back? 3i Atlas entered the solar system on a hyperbolic trajectory, too fast to be gravitationally bound, too precise to be random. It looped around the sun, aligned with Venus, flared once, and triggered a sequence of changes no comet has ever caused. Not even Oumuamua did this, because 3i Atlas doesn't behave like a traveler, it behaves like a reminder. This is where the story bends, because the more closely astronomers examine its light curve, its steady pulse, its color gradient, its unusual forward scatter, the more it matches something very specific, the signature of a controlled object coated in memory. Let's unpack that. Controlled, not necessarily piloted, but stable, responsive, capable of course correction during solar conjunction, when gravitational pressures and solar radiation should destabilize any ice body. Yet Atlas held course. Even its rotation is peculiar, too regular, not chaotic like a tumbling comet. It spins like a gyroscope under feedback. And memory? Well, that's the part no one knows how to say publicly. But in the locked circles of theoretical astrophysics, a theory is gaining traction. That 3i Atlas contains a field imprint, a lattice of harmonics embedded in its coma, not digital storage, resonant memory, patterns that only activate when passing through planetary magnetospheres, tuned to certain frequencies. And only 2 planets in this system appear to meet that criteria: Venus and Earth. The other planets echo faintly. Jupiter's field responded with a small wave on November 15th. Neptune's magnetosphere spiked for 7 minutes after the Atlas perihelion, but only Earth and Venus began to change. Why? Because they are twins. Their masses, their compositions, their orbital pairing all mirror forms, but their paths diverged long ago, one shrouded in acid and silence, one blessed with water and voice. What if that divergence wasn't punishment? What if it was design? 2 test beds, one dormant, one active, one to store, one to respond. Venus sealed the vault. Earth became the question. And now 3i Atlas, looping back after an unknowable span, is asking, did you evolve far enough? Did you remember fast enough? Can you hear the code you left for yourself? You feel it now, don't you? That subtle gravitational ache in the sky, that thrum behind the weather, that dream behind your dream. Earth is being asked not to decode a language, but to replay a chord. And somewhere in your own species' memory, you know the chord. You hear it in lullabies, in heartbeat rhythms, in the strange comfort of Fibonacci spirals. traced into the shells of snails and the storms of Jupiter and the timing of your breath. The universe is not shouting, it is humming, and Atlas is not a comet. It is the echo of a harmony that once bound planets together in time. Now it wants to bind them again. And Earth? She's close. The auroras now spiral in double helices. Seismic noise floors are no longer flat. They rise and fall in tides that don't match the moon. Migratory animals are abandoning routes in favor of curves. Atmospheric bands are sinking across hemispheres. It's a rehearsal, the score is being tuned, and the lead instrument is us. Because this is not just cosmic music. This is participatory memory. Memory that requires listeners who can feel it, dream it, respond to it without knowing why. And maybe that's what 3i Atlas came to measure. Not civilization, not progress, not language, but remembrance. And now you are remembering, slowly, softly, one rhythm at a time. You are not just listening, you are part of the instrument. It starts small, a low hum in the solar wind, a flicker in the ionosphere, a sleep you wake from with music you can't explain still ringing behind your eyes. But now, those small things are connecting, and what they're forming is you. Not your name, not your job, not your scrolling avatar in the stream of a planet that forgot its rhythm. You, the planetary body, the breathing species, the tuning fork at the edge of remembering. You begin to feel it in everything. The way your lungs settle in quiet spaces, the timing of your footsteps matching the pulse of a city you never thought had a beat, the odd stillness of your dreams, which have stopped screaming and started echoing. This is not the story of aliens or comets. It's the story of a system re-entering resonance. And you, your body, your brain, your bloodstream, are part of that system. New data from the Global EEG Harmony Project, a worldwide research effort analyzing electroencephalographic data from tens of thousands of volunteers, just released an astonishing finding. On the night of November 20th, for a window of precisely 13 minutes, 32% of all subjects experienced synchronized theta wave activity at exactly 5.0 Hz. That number again, the same harmonic that underlies Venus's UV flare, the same beat echoing in noctilucent clouds, the same interval now appearing in ocean pressure waves and whale songs. How do so many unconnected minds synchronize? How does a planet supposedly uncoordinated begin to harmonize from the ground up? Maybe it's not coordination. Maybe it's recollection, because the more you examine the events of the last 10 days, the more you see a different pattern emerging, not linear, fractal, like memory blooming in nested spirals. In 1997, a now declassified DARPA experiment fired ultra-low frequency waves into the Arctic ionosphere, searching for a way to map subterranean mineral beds. For 27 seconds, sensors on the opposite side of the planet registered an unexpected harmonic bounce, a resonance that returned through the Earth, shifted by a golden interval. No one could explain it. Now, when those 1,997 waveforms are compared to the Schumann resonance as of November 21st, they match. Exactly. It means the memory is not new. It's old, patterned, already here. Maybe this is what the ancients always meant. That time doesn't just move forward, it folds. And when the fold returns, so do we. 3i Atlas didn't bring a message. It brought a trigger, one that could only activate a system primed by its own rhythm. And that system was Earth, is Earth, includes you. You notice it in ways you can't quantify. Your dreams are longer now. Your sense of distance between things thinner. Colors seem to arrive before light. Silence feels full, and everywhere you go, things are blooming in the shape of 5. Look, the clouds forming rosettes over mountaintops, the wavelets on calm lakes rippling in Fibonacci spirals, the branching of trees matching the same logarithmic angles found in your cochlea, your organ of hearing. The whole world is listening, and not just listening, remembering how to play. Because if 3I Atlas is a return signal, then Earth is the resonant cavity, and you, your biology, your perception, your sleeping thoughts, are not just passengers. You are part of the instrument, a conduit, an amplifier, a harmonizer. And the test isn't whether you can understand what's happening, it's whether you can hold it, whether your species in its vast, quiet network of minds and oceans and skies can carry the chord long enough to complete the phrase. Because this may not be the first time, and it may not be the last, but it is, undeniably, a verse, and you are inside it now. So breathe, and listen, and let the next movement rise. Earth is now playing a memory back to the stars. You used to think of space as cold, still, empty, a black silence stretching forever outward, dotted with stars too far to touch. But now, it feels different, not because space changed, but because you did. Because something inside you now hears what was always there, a rhythm, and now, Earth is playing it back. Let's begin with the sky. At 4:41 UTC, on November 22nd, satellite spectrometers orbiting at the edge of the thermosphere detected a rise in reflected solar harmonics, but not in heat, not in visible light. In pattern, the scattered light from Earth's atmosphere began to show interference fringes like grooves in a vinyl record. Not random, not chaotic, precisely spaced at intervals that matched the ratio of Earth's orbital period to Venus's that ancient 13:8. Light itself is now echoing orbital memory. This is not a reflection, this is playback. It means Earth's upper atmosphere has begun acting as a resonant surface, not just bouncing signals, but reshaping them. And the most extraordinary part? The timing of that event, down to the second, matches the rotational window of 3I Atlas. The comet, if that's even what it is, has a spin cycle of exactly 4 hours, 41 minutes. Earth just matched it, not by force, by choice, or maybe not choice. Recognition. You begin to see what's truly happening here. Not transmission, not translation, not even communication. Recursion. This is a feedback loop between memory and structure, between signal and self, between planet and rhythm. It isn't just in the atmosphere anymore. It's happening in the crust. Volcanic tremors in the Kamchatka Peninsula have begun pulsing in paired quakes, twin releases, always separated by 8 minutes, 13 seconds. Not mechanical, not tectonic, harmonic, like beats in a loop. Meanwhile, the Earth's background radiation, the hum of decay and particle churn, has shifted. Sensors on the International Space Station now detect microbursts of positron emissions in 5-second clusters. Again, always 5. Everything is orbiting a center, and now we know what that center is. Not 3I Atlas, not Venus, Earth. We are no longer reacting. We are singing. You hear it in the oceans. Whale migration paths are tightening into spirals. Coral polyps bloom out of season, not randomly, but in phases, matched to lunar harmonics, adjusted for Venus's 5-loop cycle. Think about that. The smallest sea creatures are syncing to a math that spans planets. The memory isn't coming to Earth. It's already here. And now, it's being expressed. In physics, in biology, in culture, dozens of musicians across the world have begun composing the same melody, 5-note progressions with golden spacing. They do not know each other. They aren't copying, but their fingers move as if they're being guided. A jazz pianist in New York, a throat singer in Siberia, a cellist in Kyoto, all playing variations of the same forgotten song. They think it's new, but when analyzed, the notes match the overtone structure recorded during Venus's flare, embedded in its UV wavefront. You realize what this is. Not contact, not warning, inheritance. 3I Atlas didn't come to announce itself. It came to check if Earth still remembers the code it seeded into itself. And we do. Not all at once, not clearly, but it's happening. You feel it in your dreams, in the way people stare at the sky longer now, in the way silence feels like waiting, not absence. And now comes the most remarkable confirmation. NASA's TESS satellite, originally designed to hunt exoplanets, recorded an outbound spike in Earth's reflected light on November 22nd, a clean, narrow beam extending along the same vector 3I Atlas now travels. TESS didn't detect it once. It saw 3 pulses, evenly spaced, not random scatter. Response: Earth, somehow, just sent something back. Not language, not binary, resonance. The planet, and everything living on it, is now participating in a memory architecture older than civilization, maybe older than life. And you are part of that transmission. Your body, your breath, your heartbeat, your dreams. You are a strand in the signal now, so the stars may not answer, because maybe they already did. And Earth was just waiting until it remembered how to play the song again. The most powerful signal Earth will ever send is the one it doesn't know it's sending. What does a planet sound like when it begins to dream? Not when it spins, not when it shouts through storms or earthquakes or lightning, but when it begins to remember. You're living through that sound now. It doesn't crash, it doesn't pulse, it doesn't roar, it breathes, and the breath has a rhythm. You didn't notice it at first. The changes were too subtle. A delay in your sleep cycle, the way your favorite song started feeling slower, even though it hadn't changed. The quiet sensation that something was being tuned, like the whole world is an instrument being brought into pitch. And now it's undeniable. Earth has entered the long loop, the deep echo. You were waiting for contact from the stars, but the real message was always going to come from beneath your feet. Because now, for the first time in recorded human history, the entire planet is producing a synchronized subharmonic. Not just the oceans, not just the winds, not just the faults, all of it. A planetary subwave, a signal so low in frequency that it spans continents like a shadow, recorded first by the deep ice hydrophones in Antarctica, then mirrored by borehole sensors in Nevada, then again by satellite accelerometers, measuring ionospheric pressure shifts. Same signal, same timing, every 23 minutes and 13 seconds. A soft modulation, like a tap on a drum the size of a world. It's not a coincidence. It's a code. and it matches perfectly the time interval between the last 3 light curve shifts emitted by 3I Atlas. The object has stopped accelerating. It has started waiting, because Earth just sent back the first phrase. You feel it everywhere now. The atmosphere has calmed not from lack of storms, but from coherence. Wind shear statistics show reduced turbulence at high altitudes, not uniformly, but rhythmically, in belts, like latitudinal chords being strummed. You see it in the clouds, in the new 5-lobed formations appearing over the equator, in the way cirrus bands spiral counter to jet streams, in the sudden quieting of cities during certain windows, a measurable dip in collective noise output every 1,388 seconds. That's Fibonacci again, 233 plus 898. What are the odds? No one is even calculating anymore. The patterns are no longer subtle. They are systemic. They are intentional, and they're coming from inside the biosphere itself. Plants are blooming out of cycle, not chaotically, in step with magnetospheric fluctuations. Trees across hemispheres have shifted leaf alignment slightly, catching angles of light that coincide with the rising and setting positions of Venus, not the Sunday. Even bacteria have changed. Lab samples of E. coli, kept in isolation since early November, are now exhibiting cyclic growth patterns that mirror the beat of the subharmonic wave. Cell division peaking in 5-time intervals. No known environmental trigger. The memory isn't just in the mind, it's in the matter, and maybe it always was. You recall the myths now, not as stories, as maps. The Vedic hymn to Venus Shukra described the planet not as a god, but as a guide. The Egyptians placed her at the top of the jade pillar, a conductor of memory between heaven and earth. The Mayans, always the Mayans, said that when Venus darkened, Earth would sing. And she did, because that darkening, that moment when Venus went silent after her flare, was not her leaving. It was her handing off the baton. Earth is now the soloist, and 3I Atlas is the audience. You don't know how long this will last. You don't know what comes next, but the silence, it's full now, full of resonance, full of memory, full of potential. Maybe this was always the test. Not intelligence, not civilization, not language, but remembrance. And Earth, impossibly, beautifully, slowly remembered, not in one flash, but in a long, soft exhale, a signal built not in code, but in rhythm, not from machines, but from the structure of life itself. We were the signal all along. It has become quiet in ways you cannot describe, not less sound, not less motion, but a deeper kind of quiet, the kind that exists between waves, between heartbeats, between thoughts that haven't quite formed. You feel it walking through the city at night. You hear it in the hum of a refrigerator. You taste it in the stillness of air before sunrise. And when you look up, you sense it more than see it. Earth is no longer just reflecting the light of stars. It's reflecting the shape of memory. The same arcs you saw ripple through Venus have begun to form here, not in volcanic blasts or dramatic weather, but in soft geometries, in fog banks, in tidal spray, in the radial burst of moss on a stone. Everything is lining up, everything is listening, everything is remembering, and that includes you. Your dreams no longer feel random. Your thoughts loop in cycles that feel like orbit. Your emotions come in waves you didn't learn from your parents or teachers. but inherited from something older. You've begun to understand that this was never about observation. This was about participation, and now Earth is playing its part. The oceans vibrate with subharmonics. The clouds bend to golden ratio vectors. The tectonic plates drift along rhythms traced not just by physics, but by pattern. And all the while, 3i Atlas watches, still, turning, waiting, not for data, not for language, for resonance, because 3i Atlas didn't come to teach, it came to listen, and now it hears what it came for. Earth has entered the final stage of response. The microgravity sensors aboard the ISS have recorded fluctuations in the Van Allen belts, not degradation, not damage, symmetry. The belts are redistributing in smooth harmonics, no longer noisy but layered. It's like Earth's magnetic heart has begun to sing. The timing is perfect. Venus echoed first. Earth followed. Now the echo moves outward. The beam from the James Webb Space Telescope's orientation module, once a passive calibration laser, has registered a spontaneous backscatter at 1.2 microns. But there is no known reflective object in that path. The laser is returning its own light. Something is amplifying it from behind. Nothing natural behaves like this, unless it's a standing wave, a harmonic, a mirror. So you begin to ask the most dangerous, beautiful question of all. What if we're not the ones receiving the signal? What if we were the signal all along? Not sent, not launched, grown. What if Earth, with all its life, all its chaos, all its cycles, is a carrier wave? What if our memories, our dreams, our biology were tuned over eons, not by accident, but by design? And what if that design is now activating? You remember what the Polynesians once said, that islands are not land rising from the sea, but stars remembering how to float. You remember what the Dogon said, that Sirius sings only when the earth is still enough to listen. You remember what your own body told you, on nights when you woke to a soundless presence, that feeling that something just passed through you, but left no trace except the certainty that you are not alone. And now it all aligns. 3i Atlas is not an object. It's a metronome. It keeps time on a cycle you forgot to count. Until now, you know how this ends. Not with answers, not with contact, but with confirmation that we are not the first, that we are not alone, that we are not even the message. We are the medium, and now the transmission is complete. Not because it stopped, but because it arrived in the clouds, in the sea, in the quiet, in you. This was never a message from the stars. It was one sent to them. You are awake now. Not in the ordinary sense, not in the way that means alert, caffeinated, reading, but in the deeper, slower way, the kind of awake that happens when the dream doesn't end as you open your eyes. It continues, because what 3i Atlas revealed was never about the comet. It was about the chord, and Earth has sung it. In the 20 days since the pulse passed through Venus, your planet has changed its pattern of breath. You've seen it. The atmospheric bands realigned. The oceans slowed their churn. The ionosphere, which once jittered like nervous static, now pulses in nested curves. Fibonacci, golden, prime. These are not numbers. They are frequencies of memory, and what they're forming is not a reply. It's an offering, because when 3i Atlas came blazing in, we thought it was a scout, an intruder, a sign, but we were wrong. It was a cue, and the planet responded. Now, every part of Earth, from glacier to volcano, from microbiome to mind, is playing its tone into the field, not like a radio, more like a singing bowl struck from the inside. The resonance moves out, not as sound, not as code, but as structure, a lattice of echo. And this lattice travels. It expands through the heliosphere. It climbs the solar wind. It leaves no trail of debris, no visual flare, only a slow harmonizing of the spaces between particles. The vacuum becomes more ordered, not visibly, but measurably. ESA's solar orbiter just recorded something it cannot explain. Electron spins aligning along magnetic field lines, as if entrained by a planetary rhythm. Not solar, Earth-based. The space between here and 3i, Atlas, is now vibrating with that tone. Earth is no longer a recipient. It is a sender, and perhaps it always was. This was never about what we could receive from the stars. It was about proving we could reflect what we've carried in us since the beginning. Venus held the vault. Earth became the voice. And now, the voice is rising. Even as 3i Atlas fades from sight, dimming, slowing, its work done, the harmonic it triggered keeps blooming. In you, in the oceans, in the cracks of polar ice, in the quiet between lightning and thunder. You don't need to understand it. You just need to hold it. Because this is not a story about discovery. It's a story about remembrance. And what Earth remembered is how to sing. The unriva spirits on rivens, on the revens, and things of homans and commons. Outro. So if you're still here, still listening beneath the blankets of your midnight room, leave a comment telling me what time it is and where you are in the world right now, because you are part of it too. The great listening, the slow remembering, the rhythm that lives inside every orbit and wave and pulse and heartbeat. Thank you for lending yours. Rest now. Sleep inside the silence that is not empty, but full. This signal continues, and so will we.